there are still a lot of questions about the trial, and we're going to answer some of them right now live. We've got your questions. And of course, if you want to participate, just go to cnn.com/Trump trial questions. Fill out the form, type in your question there, and then we'll reach out to you and have you call in as the trial unfolds. Let's get to our first caller tonight. We've got Robert from Ohio. Robert, what's your question?
Hi, Laura. Love your show.
Thank you.
So my question is, in terms of the upcoming trial regarding the former president, why is the jury selection and whether they can be impartial being questioned so much? There's been many very high-profile trials where everyone has been told they will be judged by a selection of their peers. Is this special treatment, or does every American get this level of scrutiny for potential jurors for a fair trial?
That's a great question, Robert, and thank you so much for calling in. You know, there's a lot of attention on this case because of the high-profile nature of the actual defendant to really test to see whether or not it's an honor system, so to speak, or one that you can actually have a jury of one's peers. I think this is going to be a real challenge for people without having cameras in the courtroom to understand what the nature of the voir dire process is like. It's not the first time someone's questioned whether a juror is telling the truth when they are talking about their views or absence of bias, but it'll be a real test of our justice system to figure out if people have continued trust in that prospect. Let's hear from you all out there as well. In a second, Brian from Evanston, Illinois, what's your question?
Hi, Laura and fellows on the panel. Thanks for taking my question. I'm curious, if the prosecution deems it necessary, can they put Trump on the stand for examination? And if not, why not?
That's a great question. Brian, what's your thought?
No. Defendants have a Fifth Amendment right under the Constitution not to be a witness against themselves. That's true of President Trump, just as it's true of any other defendant. And so he can't be called to testify against himself. Of course, he can if he wants to in the defense case. And
they had this Sandoval hearing as well, which is kind of unique to New York, where before the trial, you get a sense of what is the scope of the cross-examination? Like, what am I walking into if I'm a defendant here to figure out, do I want to do this? Do I not? But you have until really the defense's case is put on to figure out if you want to do it. Anita from New Jersey, what's your question?
Hi, Laura. Thank you for taking my call, and it's a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.
My question is, will background checks be done on the 12 plus the 6 alternate chosen jurors?
You know, well, so far we've certainly seen that they know how to find their social media posts. It's been a part of all the conversations today, whether it's Facebook or otherwise. And certainly defense has every invested interest in figuring out who might be on this panel. What do you think, James?
No, the court administration and the court administrators make those determinations. There's not a background check process for that. They have a process by which they select jurors from the particular jurisdiction, and it has nothing to do with a background check, if you will. It has to do with qualifications to be a juror.
And of course, the qualifications, people to know out there what they really are. You got to, I think, be 18 years of age. You cannot have been convicted of a felony in New York. And of course, this is a Class E felony case for Donald Trump. 34 counts with a maximum penalty for each of 4 years, accumulating, if he were convicted of all of them, in a 20-year sentence, if not, obviously, probation or some other combination of things. Let's go to Heather from Sevierville, Tennessee. Heather, what's your question?
Hi, Laura. I love you so much.
Thank you. I love you too.
I was just wondering, thank you. Would Trump's lawyers ever take the risk in allowing an unfair, sleeper juror to get selected on purpose so they can make an attempt at a mistrial later on to delay the trial past the election?
Gosh, you know, I've heard a lot about this idea of a sleeper juror, the stealth juror, other synonyms to describe somebody who's trying to say what they need to say to get onto the jury panel with the hope of maybe being the one to swing the jury in one direction or another, or maybe even hang the case. The thing about it is you've got to have 12 jurors and then 6 additional alternate jurors who are there in case there's any violation of a court order. The judge will instruct about what they can and cannot do during the duration of the actual trial. So if there is one so-called sleeper juror, they've got to contemplate maybe 5 additional ones or a total of 17 others to figure out who that would be. That's quite a game of Russian roulette, as you would say, on this issue. But there's every possibility there is someone on the jury panel who is seated right now, or might be, who has a different interest. The job of the prosecution and the defense counsel, and the judge really, is to figure out whether there are genuinely answered questions about impartiality on that very point. Let me turn to you, though, on this, because that's one of the concerns inside the courtroom. Is it not that someone there is just trying to people please, smile their way and then have their hands behind their back.
Right. There was an amazing moment, I think, in the prosecution presentation today when the prosecution basically laid out a set of things that were posed as questions about how they could be impartial. But really what he was suggesting was a set of answers for the jurors to offer about their impartiality. The prosecutor said, this isn't about politics. We don't care what you think about, him as a politician. We care what you think of the facts and the evidence. And yes, he was presenting that to them and arguing that that was important and asking them if they could do that. But he was also laying out a roadmap for how they could answer those questions in a way that would not get them bounced from the jury. And I thought that was a fascinating back and forth through the day.
Really important. Heather, I have a question for you, by the way, while you're on the line still. You actually voted for Trump, I understand, in 2016. You changed your mind after Charlottesville. Do you think that one's political opinion of Trump might have an impact whether they could be a fair juror?
I would hope not. One of the reasons that I pray he doesn't get back into office is he obviously doesn't respect our institutions. And as much as I don't like him, I would hold myself to a very high standard of remaining impartial because nobody deserves to be found guilty when they're innocent, not even Trump.
This is the rub for everyone in that courtroom today. Thank you so much, Brian and James also, and Devlin. Thank you, everyone, for helping to answer those questions. And thanks to everyone who called in. Hey, do you have a question you want answered on an upcoming trial date? Well, we'd love to hear from you. Submit your questions at cnn.com/Trump trial questions.